From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
A climate staffer for Kamala Harris backtracks after muddying the waters again on the VP's stance toward fracking and oil and gas drilling. Meantime, Democratic green policies ironically put more money in the pocket of one of their favorite people, Elon Musk. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnists Alicia Finley and Kim Strassel. We're now only 11 days from the November 5 election, and there are 35 million early votes already cast, according to the election lab at the University of Florida. That includes 19 million mail ballots out of about 65 million mail ballots that have been requested so far. The presidential race, at least, seems to be tightening. Many voters listening to Kamala Harris, continuing to try to figure out, without much success in some cases, what her stances are. One recent controversy is on fracking again. Let's listen to Kamala Harris asked about this at a CNN town hall this week.
You said you're clear you would not ban it as president.
No, I would not ban it as president.
Right, you're clear on that. Do you think it is bad for the environment, though?
I think that we have proven that we can invest in a clean energy economy. We can mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. We can work on and sustaining what we need to do to protect this beautiful earth of ours and not ban fracking.
Alicia, to my mind, this is another classic example of using a lot of words to not directly answer the question, something that Kamala Harris seems to have become expert at in recent days. But there's also a controversy that was sparked by a recent Q&A with Politico by the Harris campaign's climate engagement director. Give us a sense of that controversy and what exactly did she say?
So this goes back to last month's presidential debate in which the VP boasted about casting the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, which she said opened up new leases for fracking. Well, that actually isn't true. What the IRA did, it conditioned offshore leases for wind on the administration also holding auctions for offshore oil and gas. Now, the issue had been that the administration was slow walking these lease sales. And so this was a provision inserted by the West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin to try to ensure that the administration held leases. Well, that actually didn't happen. The administration has continued to slow walk these lease sales. It actually, in its latest 5-year plan, includes the fewest lease sales for oil and gas in history. Now, Politico pressed on this issue because it almost sounded like during the debate that she was boasting about promoting oil and gas industry. And her climate engagement director, Ms. Thorndike, tried to put those concerns to rest by saying that she's not promoting expansion of oil and gas and that voters who care about climate change understand that she's someone that not only movements can work with, but she has championed these causes and that we know who she is, which implies that, well, she's with them, she really does want to ban fracking, and that she will continue to use the administration's regulatory powers to restrict it to the best of her ability. But then when the press reported on these comments, Ms. Thorndike backtracked and said, well, I didn't really explain myself clearly here, as she tweeted. The VP has not banned fracking, doesn't support banning fracking, and in fact cast the tie-breaking vote on the biggest pro-climate law ever, which, yes, opened new fracking leases. People know that's her position. Well, that's the problem, is that people really don't know what's her position. She's equivocated, bobbed and weaved when pressed on this, and this really underlines the problem with Harris, is people really don't feel like they know where she stands, and this is just another illustration of that.
And for voters in Western Pennsylvania, a promise not to ban fracking, to my mind, is a pretty low bar. What they really want to know is, would she have other policies, other regulations that make it more difficult for frackers to operate, or would she support expanding that? And Kim, even the cleanup of this comment to Politico, I agree with Alicia, does not provide any real clear view on what the vice president's position is and what she would try to do if she's in the Oval Office.
This has been one of my frustrations with the media questioning of Kamala Harris on energy in this race is everyone's decided they're just going to focus on will you or will you not ban fracking? And as you note, Kyle, it's such a top level question because the White House, Joe Biden also suggested he would ban fracking. Then he backed away from that. But what they have done is through every department, every agency, they are essentially getting rid of and cracking down on fracking and fossil fuel exploration in every other way. They have canceled lease sales of offshore lands for oil and gas development. They're shutting down mining. They have issued, obviously, all of these rules and restrictions to try to phase out gasoline-powered cars, which is so that you won't even have a need for it. They're crushing the industry by all means other than an outright fracking ban. I thought this was such a revealing moment because the mask is slipping. Kamala Harris is out there winking at the country saying, oh, don't worry, I won't do anything that's going to hurt your oil and gas jobs or make your prices go up. And yet you have these environmental activists who are completely confident that when she gets in office, she's going to do exactly what they want them to do. And I wouldn't doubt that the campaign has had those conversations sotto voce saying, don't worry, we just got to get through this election. Hold on. This was a case of a staffer who, by the way, has quite the history. Alicia could tell us some more on this, who couldn't help herself and let the cat out of the bag. And it's worthwhile remembering that it's staffers like those that are going to run policy if she's elected.
According to some counts, every new president has the opportunity to make about 4,000 political appointments. And personnel is policy, as they say. And I think that's true at the top, the people who are working directly with the president, cabinet level leaders and stuff like that. But I think it's also true the farther down you go, where there is less direct oversight by the elected official and more things that are happening in the Washington bureaucracy overseen by low-level political appointees. And Alicia, this Harris campaign climate staffer formerly worked at one point for Bernie Sanders, has made past statements about electrifying everything, your car, your furnace, your kitchen stove, your dryer. And it does raise the question in voters' minds of, you're electing a president, but that president is going to bring a huge army of people with him or her to the Oval Office, to Washington, putting them in these positions throughout the bureaucracy. What kind of staffers will those people be, and what will be their view, their worldview, their political beliefs on many of these issues?
Well, I think that's right. You have to recall that for the people in the cabinet officials and those who lead agencies, or at the FTC, SEC, and such, they actually have to be confirmed by the Senate. And right now there's a 50 vote thresholds to do so. But a lot of the people who serve beneath them do not have to be, because they're not considered superior officers of the United States or even inferior officers, because they aren't considered to have enough clout. And so they can be hired, and then they often assist in an advisory capacity, such as John Podesta, John Kerry has as well. And they have tremendous clout over decisions. Let's just look at, Thorndike's climate engagement advisor, who almost certainly will find a place in the Harris administration. Let's look at her record and what she believes. I mean, you mentioned, Kyle, that she supports the Electrify Everything movement. She had worked for the left-wing group Rewiring America, which, by the way, has been behind the movement to ban gas stoves. She has tweeted in the past, and going back to 2021, about the need for quote-unquote political and cultural change to overcome the individualism, white supremacy, and toxic patriarchy that fossil fuel companies weaponize against affordable solutions we already have for rapid carbonization. In December 2021, she called the fossil fuel industry a quote-unquote a death cult that quote-unquote quietly murders everyday good ideas. She has tweeted about down with the fossil fuel dictators and oligarchs, let's electrify everything. In fact, she repeated those remarks just this past week in a town hall meeting with some climate activists. And these fossil fuel dictators, by the way, who she is referring to, they are U.S. gas oil CEOs, not Vladimir Putin. or Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, right? So they very well do want to essentially, as Ed was saying, crush the industry. And you have to think about this in the larger perspective. It's not just Thorndike, again, who may be advising in a green or environmental capacity. You're going to get these types of people across the bureaucracy. My sources say the current Consumer Financial Protection Bureau head, Rohit Chopra, is already essentially hiring people, activists from outside to quote-unquote burrow into the agency. So just in case actually a Trump wins, that these will be people who continue to push the leftist agenda on a lot of these issues. But again, in a second term, you're going to see many more of them. I alluded to earlier the engagement or the town hall meeting that Thorndike held with activists, in which she actually promised government jobs to the 20,000 activists out there who are now organizing quote-unquote communities for free. Well, if Harris wins, we will now pay you to do that, she promised, which is really something. But that's the types of people that you're going to see in a Harris administration.
Hang tight. We'll be right back in a moment. Welcome back. Kamala Harris has pledged to appoint a Republican to her cabinet, but I'm not sure how much to make of that pledge for a couple of reasons. One is that one Republican out of these 4,000 political appointees does not seem like it would make much of a difference. And a president of either party, I think, deserves advisors on important issues that generally agree with the boss and can provide advice within the framework that the president works inside. And so I can only expect that whatever Republican is named to Kamala Harris, if she's elected, would be in one of these kind of ancillary positions. Welcome Liz Cheney to the Small Business Administration or something like that, but a place where it would not have a deep effect on the policy decisions being made out of the White House. What about the flip question, Kim? Who Trump would bring into Washington with him? Trump had a record in his first term of appointing people and then falling out of favor with them and denigrating them, tweeting about them after the fact. Do you think that that would have any effect on his ability to draw talent to these jobs, some of which are high-profile cabinet-level jobs, giving people platforms of their own, but many of which are less high-profile jobs within the Washington bureaucracy?
I think it depends on which positions you're talking about. There are undoubtedly a couple of high-profile figures that were thoroughly fed up with Donald Trump after January 6th. Were very aggressive in their condemnation of him. I doubt you would see them attracted back to the administration. I'm thinking here of Attorney General Bill Barr, for instance, or, Elaine Chao, who came and worked, and Donald Trump has spent the last 4 years bashing on her. So that seems unlikely. That being said, it's been overshadowed in this race because the press is so much more interested in meditating on this or that unusual thing that Donald Trump said on the stump. But he has spoken quite passionately about his desire to double down on his deregulatory agenda if he comes back. Before, remember, one of the, I think, achievements of the Trump years were that they had a 2 out for every 1 in rule in regulation. The regulators had to get rid of 2 rules for any one that they proposed. They actually succeeded that number. He's now talking about 10 out for 1 in. That's pretty astonishing. It would be a bit of a stretch. Don't forget that there are a great deal of movement conservatives who were really thrilled with his first term because they got to come into these departments and they really were left to kind of get on with it and deregulate. I think you'll see those sort of people coming back in the expectation. Again, it'll depend department to department. If you go and look, for instance, at the Commerce Department or the U.S. Trade Representative, those are likely to be people that are much more influenced by the new J.D. Vance and Lighthizer crowd that doubling down on Donald Trump's tariff interests this time, et cetera. But I think from the pure agencies like Interior or Energy, EPA, you'll probably get some pretty aggressive reformers there.
Meantime, while we're on the subject of green policies, Tesla shares up 22% on Thursday after a positive earnings report. And Alicia, what is your read of this earnings report, and particularly the role of climate policies in helping float those numbers?
Right. So a lot of analysts expected lower profit in part because Tesla's sales have been slowing. They're still growing, but slowing. And it has actually been having to cut prices on its cars because of its slowing sales. So it's trying to gin up more demand by reducing its prices. And as a result, its auto sales actually only increased by about 1% compared to the same quarter last year. But offsetting that slowing growth has been an increase in these quote-unquote regulatory credits. And I say quote-unquote because that's actually the way that these are described in its SEC filings. And those grew by 33% year over. And what these credits do is that they allow other manufacturers who aren't able to meet California's electric vehicle quotas or the Environmental Protection Agency's greenhouse gas emissions standards to buy them from those who have a surplus. And Tesla is the main company that has a surplus. I mean, Rivian does too, because they only produce EVs. And so Tesla is just getting a windfall from these credit sales that directly boost its bottom line. These credits actually accounted for about a third of its profit in the last quarter. And these credits will actually grow and become more valuable as these mandates increase, because more and more automakers are probably going to have to rely on them to meet their regular requirements. And you're seeing actually that happen in Europe. As a result, Tesla is going to become probably more profitable because of that. There are other ways that the Tesla has been milking subsidies. We go into like $7,500 IRA tax, the Inflation Reduction Act tax credit for consumers. And if you extrapolate from its EV sales over the last quarter, that amounts to about $1.25 billion in tax credits for Tesla. And then there are also consumer EV rebates, like in places like California. Canada provides those as well, by the way. That accounted for about $315 million at the end of the last quarter. And then Tesla's, it's actually its fastest growing business is its energy storage and batteries. And these are both for like home power walls and utility scale batteries. And these are becoming more and more in demand in places like California that are trying to balance out their grid while also achieving their climate mandates. So California and actually Texas are the biggest consumers of Tesla's batteries. And Tesla says that these IRA manufacturing credits are actually boosting its energy generation and storage margins. They can offset actually about a third of the cost of producing batteries. And so if you add it all up, you can actually figure out that the subsidies account for all of Tesla's profits. And so that's kind of an irony, is that the Democrats are handing out all these subsidies and they're directly actually benefiting one of the people they hate most next to Donald Trump. But it's not just that. They complain about the rich, not paying their fair share or getting richer. And then they basically provide all these tax credits and subsidies that allow them to game the tax code too. So they want to have it both ways.